to talk to you all about development of wood products LCA data and its usage in green building code applications. We have our copyright here and some slides for our AIA accreditation. This course is AIA approved, as Marcy said. You folks have all seen the course description and the objectives, so we're just going to breeze through those. And before I start talking today, we're going to kick it off with a poll, just so everyone is well-versed and familiar with how our polls work. So the first question I'll give to Marcy.
All right, I am trying to launch here. Here we go. Sorry about that. What is your profession? A, architect, and B, engineer, C, code official, D, building designer, or E, other? All right. Again, I wait for about 30 seconds or 85%, whichever comes first. And in this case, it looks about 85%. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results. So it looks to be about 71% of you are engineers, 18% code officials, 6% other, and 5% architects. No building designers. Welcome to all of you. We're glad that you're here. And Lori, you can take it back.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. So here's an outline of what we're going to go through today. So I'll be referring to this as we go through, but our first topic is going to be what is the ICC 700 or National Green Building Standard. The ICC 700 was jointly developed by ANSI, the National Association of Home Builders, and ICC. Today's presentation is going to focus solely on the 2012 National Green Building Standard. The 2015 NGBS is currently under development and should be available sometime in early 2016. But the 2012 NGBS is a residential green building rating system, and it covers energy, water, indoor environmental quality, site and materials, and can be used for new construction or renovations. It can be used for both single and multi-family homes, and it also contains provisions for land development of residential and mixed-use communities. It can be used by any designer or builder to certify a project and can be used as the basis for a jurisdictional residential green codes. What changes are there from the 2008 version? The IECC, or the International Energy Conservation Code reference, has changed. The 2008 NGBS referenced the 2006 IECC. The 2012 references the 2009 IECC. This results in a 15% increase in energy performance on the structure. There are 2 new chapters on renovations, and also there are additional points for green community site selection. Our next topic is going to be, what is LCA? LCA is an acronym for Life Cycle Assessment, although you may have heard it called Life Cycle Analysis as well. And it is a tool for the analysis of the environmental impacts of a product, material, or system. So this would include resource extraction, manufacture, transportation, installation, use, maintenance, and disposal. And by disposal, we mean the end-of-life stage. So if a product is reused or recycled, this is also included. The LCA yields results that are quantifiable, standardized per ISO 14044 in our case, and science-based. This illustrates a life cycle assessment of wood building products. So a full LCA would include not only the carbon stored by the forest, but also the process of harvest and transportation of the logs to the factory, any emissions produced in the factory, carbon storage of the building products during their life or their use stage, and then end-of-life disposal or recycle reuse. So what tools do we have for life cycle assessment? The National Green Building Standard says that all tools used in LCA must be ISO 14044 compliant. They do also have a provision for equivalent standards, but for the most part we're going to stick with the ISO standards since they are the most well-known and widely accepted. Some of the more common LCA programs are CIMAPRO, GABI, the REVIT plugin, Tally, the Athena Impact Estimator, and NIST's BEES program. CIMAPRO and GABI are very comprehensive LCA programs and may produce more results than required for the NGBS analysis. Programs such as Tally and the Athena Impact Estimator are more commonly used by engineering practitioners for their simple user interface. For those of you that are already using REVIT as part of your building information modeling scheme, Tally is a simple plugin that interfaces with REVIT and allows you to perform an LCA rather quickly. Athena Impact Estimator is a free program available on Athena's website and can be used for whole buildings or product and assemblies. NIST's BEES program is an online program, and while it is no longer supported by NIST, it is acceptable for the 2012 NGBS. NIST is currently working on a new program called BIRDS to replace BEES. Our next topic is, what is an EPD and how do you develop one? So an EPD falls under the broader umbrella of environmental labels or eco-labels. So there are three main types of eco-labels as defined by ISO. A Type 1 eco-label is awarded by a third-party program to products that have good environmental attributes. Usually this is a single attribute, but can be multi-attributes. A common one that many are familiar with is the Energy Star label for appliances. A Type 2 eco-label is a self-declared claim by a manufacturer about some aspect of their product. For example, a biodegradable product with a manufacturer's green label would be a Type 2 eco-label. Type 3 eco-labels are known as environmental product declarations. These are governed by ISO 14025, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these. The definition of an environmental product declaration, or EPD, is a concise, standardized, independently verified report on environmental performance. ISO has several standards dealing with EPD development. For us, the relevant ones we deal with are ISO 14025 for Type 3 EPDs, ISO 14040 and 14044, which govern life cycle assessments, and ISO 21930, which are the product category rules and EPD for building products. So the EPD process can seem a little long and convoluted, and it is certainly not something that happens overnight. You start with your program operator, who then has general program instructions and product category rules which dictate how the LCA is performed. In turn, the LCA guidelines can influence the product category rules. This then leads to the development of an EPD, which is verified by an independent third party. The responsibilities of the program operator are set out in ISO 21930, and they include to adopt, adapt, or develop product category rules as necessary, review and verify the EPDs, and ensure all standards are followed. Typically, a program operator retains a third-party verifier for the verification of EPDs. The American Wood Council and Canadian Wood Councils chose UL Environment as our program operator in the development of our EPDs for wood products. Product category rules specify parameters to be considered for a given family of products. The North American PCR was developed by an organization called FP Innovations, who in turn based that PCR on the one from the Norwegian EPD Foundation and the German Institute for Construction and Environment. UL Environment then adopted FP Innovations PCR for North American wood products. So in order to produce consistent LCA studies for similar products, a PCR provides system boundaries for the assessment. This is how a PCR ensures consistency and, in some cases, comparability of EPDs across a category of products that serve the same function. Our life cycle inventory data was collected by a group of university researchers known as CORM, the Consortium for Research on Renewable Industrial Materials. CORM started collecting data on various stages of forest products harvest and manufacture back in 2004, and then further broke that data down into modules that reflect the environmental impacts of harvest and reforestation, transport of logs, and manufacture of wood products in various regions. CORM then developed the LCA reports necessary to comply with the PCR requirements, which led to our EPDs. So, as I said, the EPDs are based on these LCA reports, and EPDs produced under the FP Innovations ULE product category rules report global warming potential, ozone depletion potential, acidification potential, smog potential, eutrophication potential, and some additional LCI data including primary energy consumption, material resources consumption, and non-hazardous waste generation. So, next we'll talk about EPDs for the North American wood industry. The American and Canadian Wood Councils have published 9 EPDs so far for softwood lumber, softwood plywood, oriented strand board, glue laminated timbers, LVL, wood I-joist, medium density fiberboard or MDF, particle board, and redwood decking, which was actually developed in cooperation with the California Redwood Association. Additionally, the Western Red Cedar Association has an EPD for cedar siding, giving a total of 10 EPDs for wood products. Additionally, we have 2 pending EPDs that we anticipate on releasing soon. One for LSL and one for fiberboard. Each EPD includes a third-party verification form similar to this one, which shows our compliance with ISO 14025 and 21930. Most of our EPDs are business-to-business or B2B in scope. The exceptions being redwood decking and cedar siding, which are business-to-consumer or B2C in scope. B2B scope is also called cradle-to-gate, and B2C scope is called cradle-to-grave. Cradle-to-grave scope indicates the LCA accounts for all life cycle stages from resource extraction through the manufacturing and use stages all the way to the end of life stage. However, the multitude of potential uses for wood products makes a cradle-to-grave EPD nearly impossible, as it's very difficult to ascertain how folks are going to use their wood product. With this in mind, we developed ours as cradle-to-gate, meaning that the resource extraction and manufacturing phases are included in the LCA, and the system boundary ends at the manufacturer's gate where the product is ready to be shipped. The LCA system boundaries are shown in the EPDs and shows what's included and what's not. The system boundaries are specified in the product category rules. The results of LCA studies are very sensitive to these system boundaries, and different boundaries can give different results for the same product. As you can see from the illustration here, for example, seeding and greenhouse operations are not included in our EPD. However, planting, including the preparation for planting, is included in our EPDs. Again, these are specified in the product category rules. How are EPDs used? One of the main uses right now is in green building certification programs. LEED V4, the most recent version of LEED, has a materials and resources credit up to 2 points out of 100 that can be earned using EPDs. Green globes will allow you to earn up to 20 points, although obviously this is on a much larger point scale. It also allows designers to make informed choices about their building products and allows manufacturers to analyze areas where the products perform well versus opportunities for reducing potential environmental impacts. EPDs cannot be directly compared if the scope is different. However, if they are based on the same PCR, they can be compared. So we're going to pause here for our second poll question.
Oops, sorry. I always forget to take myself off mute. I am so sorry about that.
No
All right.
worries.
All AWC EPDs are B2C, cradle to grave in scope. True or false? All right, I've got about 60% of you have voted. Okay, get your votes in before I'm ready to close here. Quick, quick, quick. And I'm going to go ahead and close and share. 72% say false, 28% say true, and the correct
answer is false. Most of our EPDs are B2B, or cradle to gate in scope. The only exceptions, again, are redwood decking and the cedar siding available through the Western Red Cedar Association. So most of our EPDs are B2B or cradle to gate in scope. So next we're going to talk about LCA in the NGBS. So the National Green Building Standard has 3 options provided for using life cycle assessment: a whole building LCA, a product LCA, or an assembly LCA. The whole building LCA is worth a maximum of 15 points, while the product and assembly LCA can earn you a maximum of 10 points. The whole building LCA simply states a whole building LCA is performed using a LCA and using a life cycle assessment and data compliant with ISO 14044 or other recognized standards. The LCA for product or assembly is somewhat different. It says an environmentally preferable product or assembly is selected for an application based upon the use of an LCA tool that incorporates data methods compliant with ISO 14044 or other recognized standards that compare the environmental impact of products or assemblies. So the products and assemblies require a comparison, whereas the whole building LCA does not. So we're going to start with the smallest and work our way to the largest. A product LCA requires you to compare 2 or more products for improved environmental impacts in fossil fuel consumption, global warming potential, acidification potential, eutrophication potential, and ozone depletion potential. Points are awarded for each comparison where the selected product improves upon the environmental impact measures by an average of 15%. Points are awarded based on the number of impact measures showing improvement per product. So you can see from this table in the NGBS, for an individual product showing improvement in 4 of the listed impact measures, you would earn 2 points. For a product showing improvement in 5 of the impact measures, you would earn 3 points. An assembly LCA uses the same environmental impact measures as the products and allows us to make comparisons for 4 different assemblies: exterior walls, roof ceiling assemblies, interior walls or ceilings, and intermediate floors. And again, points are awarded for each comparison where the selected assembly improves upon the environmental impact measures by an average of 15%. Similar to products, the assemblies earn points based on the number of assemblies and the number of impact measures. So you can see for 4 different types of building assemblies, each with improvement in 5 impact measures, we can earn up to 10 points. Each impact measure does not need to improve by 15%, just the overall average. So if you have a product or an assembly that has improvement in 4 impact measures, but for whatever reason shows a negative improvement or is worse in 1 impact measure, that doesn't mean you can't use it to earn points. You just will only get the credit for the 4 impact measures. And we have another poll. So I'll let Marcy hand.
Coming.
Okay, great.
All right. Global warming potential is not one of the impact categories that must be compared between LCA analyses and the NGBS. True or false? I'm so glad you all start voting before I finish. So that's great. 56%. Keep going. All right, and I am going to go ahead and close the poll. And share the poll. Oh, almost split right down the middle. 53% say false, 47% say true. And the real answer is?
So the answer for this one is false. So global warming potential is one of the impact categories that must be compared between LCA analyses in the NGBS. All right, so we've got some examples. And we have 3 options, as I mentioned. So we're going to start with the smallest and work our way up to the largest. For an individual product LCA, many programs are available. I listed some earlier in this presentation, but there are others out there as well, so I don't want to necessarily discount you guys from using any preferred programs you might have. For this example, we used NIST's program Bees, which can be found at this website here. And you need to do a comparison of 2 products serving the same function. Now, there aren't any code requirements. However, the commentary does state that comparisons should be made between rational, physical, and economic choices for a particular building in a given locale. So if you're doing a low-income housing project, you don't want to compare carpet and imported marble for a flooring choice. You would want to do a more rational comparison, such as carpet and laminate flooring, perhaps. So Bees has these major group elements, so they have products that fall under all of these categories. So you can see this is what the B's interface looks like. As I said, just a simple online program. And the first thing that you need to do is select the weighting. Now the weighting in B's can be very subjective. You can choose no weighting if you prefer that, or you can choose the B's stakeholder panel weighting. They also have custom user inputs available, so you can choose any weighting or no weighting if that's what you prefer. For our comparison, we had to select a major element, so ours falls under the shell major element, and an exterior exposure, or I'm sorry, exterior enclosure group element. For this comparison, our individual element is framing. So then we click Next, and it gives us some product alternatives. For this comparison, we chose a generic steel stud and a generic untreated wood stud with a transportation from manufacturer to use of 250 miles. After selecting the products you wish to compare, you simply click Compute, and B's will give you some results. This screenshot here you can see shows the environmental performance of a steel frame, a steel stud on the left and a wood stud on the right. Other results available through B's include economic versus environmental impact graphs, life cycle stage graphs, environmental flow graphs, and embodied energy graphs. All right, I see we have a question coming in. What is the process of defining the default product assembly to which we compare our design? So this is actually a very good question and something that a lot of folks have struggled with. There's no process that's actually defined in the standard, so you can choose any product to compare against your final product that was selected. However, as I said, you want to make sure that it's a rational comparison. You don't want to be comparing something that you want to use in your building with something that there is no way you would ever put it in your building, such as the example of comparing carpet to marble flooring for a low housing income project, or I'm sorry, low income housing, not low housing income, a low income housing project. So it's up to the designer to choose your baseline or reference material, but the NGBS does want you to be rational about it and not use something that is just an unreasonable product to compare for your project. Okay. So our next level of complexity in our LCA is an assembly. For this example, we used the Athena Impact Estimator, which can be downloaded for free from Athena's website here. The Impact Estimator takes into account impacts from manufacturing, transportation, on-site construction, a regional variation in energy use and transportation, the building type and assumed lifespan, maintenance and replacement effects, as well as demolition and disposal. So one thing I do want to point out that Athena takes into account is the building type and assumed lifespan, as well as maintenance and replacement effects. So for example, if you are defining a building with a 50-year lifespan, but are putting windows in that building that only have a 20-year expected life, then Athena will take into account that that building or assembly would need to include replacement of those windows 2 times during the life of the structure. Again, for an assembly, the same requirements regarding physically and economically appropriate comparisons should be considered. Assemblies in your comparison will include all the structural elements, insulation, and wall coverings, but should not include electrical and mechanical equipment and controls, plumbing products, fire detection and alarm systems, elevators, or other conveying systems. So this is what the screen of Athena's Impact Estimator looks like. It has very simple user inputs for predefined systems, or there are also ways to customize your system. So for this comparison, we compared a wood-framed wall to a steel-framed wall. And as you can see, it'll allow you to name your project whatever you want to keep track of it. So for our example, we have our wood studs and our steel studs. And it gives you options for any of these values. And then it'll provide the results of the comparison for the following impact categories as required per the NGBS. So you can see the results here. On the left we show our wood studs, and on the right we have our steel studs. Our last example is our whole building LCA. This is the most rigorous, but also worth the most points. As I mentioned before, in the 2012 NGBS, no comparisons are necessary. You simply have to perform a whole building LCA with an ISO 14044 compliant tool. For our example, we used REVIT with the Tally plugin. One thing that Tally doesn't include is on-site construction impacts. So if you're trying to build two LCAs using, for example, Tally and Athena, you can run an LCA on an identical assembly or structure, and you'll get different numbers. And one of these reasons for these differing numbers is the inclusion of the on-site construction impacts in Tally, but not, or I'm sorry, in Athena, but not in Tally. So Tally does not include the on-site construction impacts. So the Tally interface, like I said, is just a plug-in on Revit. So you'll build your building model in Revit, and then you can run your environmental impact assessment or life cycle assessment of your environmental impacts in Tally. And you'll be able to choose what you want, any materials that are necessary to include that. Oh, all right. And then Tally will give you a readout like this. So it will give you all of the categories, the environmental impact categories required in the NGBS, and it also will give it to you in a graph form as well. So this is showing on the left global warming potential, and on the right the primary energy demand, which is not required for an NGBS comparison, but can be a useful tool. And as you can see, for the global warming potential, we have this large red slice of the pie for manufacturing that is for concrete, and it goes these red through the kind of light peach encompass the global warming potential of the manufacturing phase. So this one is for concrete. You'll see that wood, plastics, and composites kind of get lumped together, and there this slice here, it's 8%. Maintenance and replacement, which I discussed a little bit earlier, are in these blue slices. So your wood, plastic, and composites are in this slice here, it's 12%. and then your end of life is captured by these green slices. And you can define how much of your product is recycled, how much of it is landfilled, however your end of use, end of life, however your end of life choices are for the product. Okay, we have a question on slide 46, so we'll go back to that. All right, so this graph here, this shows there's a question on what does this graph show? What does the red, yellow, and green portion show? So this shows the environmental impact for a number of categories, which can be seen over here, and when you run your bees simulation, you'll see these. So the green, I believe, is the water. This shows acidification potential here. The yellow is global warming potential, and then the red represents fossil fuel depletion. These are the measures which must be compared across the two products to demonstrate improved performance. So this is a handy tool that can help you make the comparisons in a graphical format that makes it a little easier to run and illustrate your results. Okay. So back to our whole building LCA. So as I mentioned, these graphs show global warming potential and primary energy demand, but you can produce these for any of these categories. So, all right. And then from there, we have our fourth poll question.
All right. Which of these LCA options does not require a comparative analysis between two or more options? Is that A, whole building, B, product, C, assembly, or D, component? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and then sharing it. All right, the majority, 64%, say A, whole building, 19% say component, 9% product, and 8% assembly. All right, and then Lori, the real answer is?
All right, so our correct answer is A, whole building. Whole building does not require a comparison per the 2012 NGBS. Products and assemblies, B and C, do require a comparison, and then D is component, which is not one of the choices shown in the NGBS, and we were just throwing that in there to confuse you guys. So with that, this concludes the AIA portion of the course. And we're going to pause for some housekeeping from Marcy, and then we'll take some time and take any questions you guys have.
All right, so very quickly I'm just going to go through some housekeeping like Lori said, and then we'll come back and take your questions. All right, just a little bit about us. We are the voice of North American wood products manufacturing. We develop state-of-the-art engineering data, technology, and standards for wood products to assure their safe and efficient design. We provide information on wood design and construction to assist building industry professionals, develop structural and fire performance data on a wide range of traditional and engineered wood products, and engage in long-term research. All right, and then if you can go to the next slide for me, Lori.
I'm trying.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry.
All right. First, before I go into this slide, I actually want to note that today's webinar is 1 credit. It was incorrectly represented on an earlier slide, and I apologize for that. But today's webinar is 1 credit, which is equal to zero point 0.1 CEU or 1 PDH or 1 HSW/learning unit. So I just wanted to clarify that. Remember that following today's webinar, you'll be sent an email. Please give us about a half an hour or more to process the reports and get the links ready to send out in the email. And then remember to complete the short survey for a chance to win a free publication. And then look for information about your certificate of completion and continuing education credits. Note that the actual certificates will be available within 2 weeks of the webinar. And remember that in order to receive credit, you must have been present for 90% of the webinar, which is 54 minutes. All right, and we are kind of running early on this, so stick around for those questions that are coming. All right, and finally, remember our upcoming events. Reserve April 16th, 2015's FidWiz Overview and Changes webinar, and don't forget to check out our self-directed study program. Email us at education@awc.org or visit our website at www.awc.org. Okay, that covers my information and reminders, so have a wonderful day, but don't leave. Let me turn you back over to Lori for the questions now.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. And as Marcy mentioned, in order to receive credit, you'll need to stay on the webinar for the 90% of the time. So we'll get into some questions, and please do feel free to type in your questions in the question box if you have any additional questions from the webinar. Lori, are you ready for these questions?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So now, here's one question that came in. How does the EPD take into consideration forestry and harvesting activities?
Okay, so harvest practices were studied across the primary growing regions in the U.S. and Canada, and there is some variation across the regions on these harvesting techniques. So cable-based and mechanized ground-based systems have different energy demands which have to be taken into consideration. How the land is managed is also a factor, from low to high intensity levels of management. In some regions, fertilizer is applied at predetermined time intervals, and then reforestation following harvesting is also a fundamental assumption, which ensures that more fiber is growing in the forests than is being harvested.
Okay, great. Thank you. And these questions are kind of out of order. They came in, at different rates.
Right, no problem.
Here's a question regarding poll number 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can switch to that real quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there was differences in the answers, about 50-50.
Okay. Yeah.
So I wanted to go over that and revisit it. It mentions...
There it is.
Okay. So I think the term, when it says must, it says global warming potential is not one of the impact categories that must be prepared. Do you get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I understand. So while there are, let's go back to our categories. So that is correct that you can earn credits by using the other 4 impact categories, but the question was more intended, to reflect this list of environmental impacts, and that global warming potential is one of the impacts that you generally would consider.
Mm-hmm. So if you go to the next slide, where it talks about 4 impacts versus 5,
so yes, you can get away with not using global warming potential as one of them, but then you would need to use the other 4.
The 4. Okay. Great.
Right.
Glad we could clarify that. Here's another question. It says, the NGBS is being updated. Do you know whether there are changes to the LCA credits?
Yes, actually there are. So as I mentioned, the new standard is being worked on. It's anticipated to be completed this year and available in 2016. And there are some changes to the LCA provision. but the tools that we talked about today will still be relevant. The whole building assembly and product life cycle assessments are still recognized, but the most significant change is the provisions for the whole building LCA. In 2012, we simply had to perform a whole building LCA. There wasn't a baseline building or a reference building that we had to compare it with. For the 2015 NGBS, you not only need to perform an LCA of the final building, but also a reference design building. So, as I said, these tools that we use to perform our whole building LCA would still apply, but we will have to make a comparison for whole building LCA in the 2015, which we did not have to do in the 2012.
Okay. Okay, great answer. Here's one. It says, how does AWC help determine environmental impacts of solid wood products versus composite woods, especially those that use chemical resins or binders, but may benefit from using smaller scraps of wood and recycled material content?
Can you say that again? I don't know if I caught all of it.
I know, sorry.
It's okay.
It says, how does AWC determine environmental impact of solid wood products versus composite woods? Maybe that's just the cutoff.
So the impacts likely would be from the increased the decreased waste from using more and more of the tree.
Okay.
But that's a tough question to answer off the cuff, because there's probably a few different ways. So each product has its own unique LCA report.
Right.
So if a product is using adhesives, there's going to be inventory data that's going to account for the manufacturing impacts of the adhesive.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be included in the reporting as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that's one of the keys, is that it's unique for the product.
Right. There's not just one LCA that's done for all trees that get converted into some sort of wood. Each EPD has its own unique LCA that is associated with it, and each LCA has modules that are relevant to that product. So, for example, solid sawn lumber is not going to have a module on adhesives, because that's not part of the manufacturing process.
Right. Okay. Okay, here's another question. Will the 2015 NGBS recognize industry-wide EPD?
Okay, yeah, this is a good question. Yes, the answer is yes, they will. So in the 2012 NGBS, there weren't any provisions for the use of EPDs. Even though you can get information from the EPDs that can be used for these LCA comparisons, unless they're produced under the same PCR, you can't directly compare EPDs. So there are provisions. The public comment for the 2015 NGBS is available on the Home Innovation Research Lab website, so you guys can all take a look at that. And it does contain a new section that recognizes EPDs. You can have a minimum of 10 products that have an industry-wide or product-specific EPD, and you can get up to 5 points for the use of those EPDs. Now, this, again, this is a draft version, so there may be additional changes made before this thing goes public. So we just want to be aware that this is not set in stone yet.
Okay. And here's a question. Do EPDs take into account the distance between harvesting and milling to delivery the site?
It doesn't take into account each individual product, or each individual tree and the distance every tree travels. It accounts for a typical travel distance between a harvesting site and a manufacturing facility. So since the EPDs only go to the manufacturing gate, there's not going to be any impact associated with transportation to the site. So that would fall under what's called a gate-to-grave EPD if you needed that for your individual product, or if for products such as cedar siding and redwood decking, which are considered cradle-to-grave EPDs, that would be based on kind of an overall average transportation module, since these are industry-wide EPDs and not specific to a particular product or manufacturer or mill.
Okay, great. And that leads to the next question. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on the choice between cradle to gate and cradle to grave.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned briefly, most of our EPDs are cradle to gate. This was done because it's pretty difficult to start listing all the potential uses for a wood product. A 2x4, for example, it could go into a wall in a building and be there for 50 years, or it could be some temporary formwork for somebody's garden and get burned after one use. So the use stage and the end of life stage, we could have millions of EPDs probably. So for a specific product, if a person did want to capture the full life cycle of that product, again, they would need to do a gate-to-grave analysis that would pick up the transportation from the manufacturers to, if there's a secondary manufacturer, or to a construction site, that would be reflected in an additional transportation module, and then the use phase, whatever that would include.
Okay. So you also mentioned several tools that are available, and I can't remember if you mentioned this. For most of those require someone to buy a software or some type of cost related to it. Or were any of those free? I can't remember.
Yes. So the NIST Bees program is free. As I mentioned, it's no longer being updated, but it is a viable tool for a 2012 NGBS assessment.
Okay.
Also, the Athena Impact Estimator. You can go to Athena's website, which, let's see, I think I have that in the example. Yeah, Athena's website, which is athenasmi.org. It can be downloaded for free from there.
Okay, great. Now, this is something I'm going to throw at you, sorry. Can you show people where our EPDs are on our website?
Yeah, sure.
Navigate.
I can pull that up for you guys. Let me.
You have to get out of presentation mode, and hopefully.
Okay. So,
I think you have to show your desktop, though. Change your screen mode.
Oh, okay. All right.
Do you know how to do that?
Yeah, just a second. Let me.
Make sure you have all your games closed.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to lose my place, though. All right. If my computer wants to cooperate, let's see.
Well, while you're doing that.
Yeah, sorry for the technical.
That's okay. There was a explaining slide 54.
Okay.
And that lovely pipe. After you're through with that.
Okay. All right. So here we got. So for our EPDs, they are going to be under our green building tab, and when you hover over that, you'll see our drop-down menu, and you can go click right here on EPDs, and all of our EPDs are shown, or they are downloadable here on the right side of the page, and we have the full EPD as well as the 2-page transparency brief available. The EPDs themselves are about 15 pages, and so, you know, if you only need some of the numbers on the comparisons, the environmental impact comparisons, and you're not as concerned with, you know, a characterization model of what global warming potential is, you can just pull the numbers out of the transparency brief without having to download the full EPD.
All right, great. Okay, so back to the presentation, if you don't mind. Just a couple more questions, and we're almost done. Going to the slide 54, towards the end of the presentation, where it has the pie charts. If you can,
there we go. Go to slide.
Go over, explain a little bit more about that pie.
All right, so this is just the tally breakdown that shows it'll report to you this raw number for global warming potential. So for ours, you know, we have this 101,390 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So that gives you an idea of the impact of the total structure. Now, if you wanted to dig down into that a little bit further and see where the contributions to that global warming potential are coming from, that's where this pie chart can come in handy. So if you're saying, you know, I don't want to have that high of a global warming potential contribution, where can I make you know, trade-offs? You can substitute other products if possible.
Okay.
So this allows you to dig a little deeper and see, well, you know, some of this is, the bulk of this looks like it's coming from our manufacturing phase. So can we use products that have less intensive manufacturing demands?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we have one more question. As a specifier, how do I know if a manufacturer's product can be used on a LEED green building?
So there's two different ways to approach this. Just the use of the product. You know, LEED, I believe, has, I don't know if LEED has a list. I'm not a LEED expert, sorry guys, that I don't believe that they have products that can or can't be used in the building. But if you want to earn credits for using an environmental product declaration for that product, that has to come from an ISO verified EPD. So if you have, for example, ours are industry-wide, they're considered industry-wide generic EPDs. Mm-hmm. So per LEED, each of these would be worth half of a product because they're not product, they're taking an industry average rather than an individual or regional product. So you can use if you use all 10 of our generic EPDs, that counts as 5 products per LEED.
Okay. Well, regarding LEED, could you ask the manufacturer if they have a ULE signed verification form for that product?
Yes, that is also, you can, as long as it doesn't need to be from ULE, it just has to be in compliance with the ISO guidelines. So there are other organizations out there that you can turn to. You know, ULE is not the only one. It just needs to be in compliance with the ISO standard with the verification. So the verification forms may look different from different companies, but that is what you're going to be looking for, is a verification form that shows compliance with the ISO standards.
All right. Okay, great job. We're coming up on the hour, and I believe, Marcy, do you want to close us out, or are you there?
I am here, but I am all set. I closed us out earlier, so I think we're good. Everyone have a great afternoon.